Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram Language Design Review. We are talking about Tabular again. And we're trying to look at the top level guide page describing tabular processing. So, can you scroll it down a bit just so we can see? Actually, you might as well make it as tall as your display is. Tabular communication. It's an interesting concept. Okay. So which things here have we already reviewed?
So we've done a little bit. We primarily worked on tabular object, a little bit on data sources, cleaning, a little bit, and transformations where we spent the bulk of our time. Object and transformations where we spent the bulk of our time. We've dipped into visualization a little bit. We haven't really talked about modeling. We haven't really talked about communication.
All right. So is modeling, modeling, we've got this whole issue about variable names and things, right?
Yes.
Are we tackling that today, or are we not tackling that today?
No, it has to be when Julia is back. And I think
so what
that
do you want to talk about today?
I think today what we can do is as we drip into these different pieces, we'll see, I think we can identify gaps or things that we need to return to. And I think that would be very valuable. To drill into any particular topic usually needs prep and some time, both. Okay, so if we pick object, is that okay? So the object basically is sort of representation, options, also sub-representations.
You might want to make it larger, but okay. So
and very basic operations like getting stuff, getting parts out.
So how do we represent remote data here?
It's not covered here. It's not covered here because we don't have a working design for that. So we can have remote data. If you go to data sources, we can have remote data in the following sense.
We had transparent remote data. I thought that's our goal, is to have transparent remote data wrapped in a tabular, but it's in fact running on a remote SQL.
No, I mean, that's one thing, but that's not, no, I don't think that that's an MVP goal.
What does transparent mean?
It means that you do operations like, transform missing, just as you would not knowing whether the data that you have is in a remote SQL database or is local in memory.
Eagerly, like you have to wait every time you hit shift enter, you have to wait like 10 seconds for the data to be processed and transferred.
No, our primary goal is in-memory processing. Secondary goal is to have out-of-core or out-of-memory processing. And that, yes, but we don't have that. We don't have that working yet, so it's not here. We don't know exactly.
All right. Okay. But I thought that's okay. But that's the primary thing Carlo is working on. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, but it's not transparent. We never said transparent. We said lazy, and then there's a function that brings it into memory. Like it doesn't feel exactly the same as, like, you always want to perform all the operations together at the same time.
Okay, but we've been through this many times, and I mean, when do we get to see that design?
Well, we looked at it already like a month ago. Like I am making improvements to it. Like some of it is broken right now, so you can't look at it at the moment on today's prototype. But like today, I worked on this with Rob for 2 hours and a half. It's improving.
Okay, but so do you feel you have a design that I've approved for this?
Yeah. We'll have to look at it again, I think.
Okay, but I mean, it's not something where I'm going to say it's all the wrong way around. Correct?
I don't know, Stephen. I cannot predict that.
Stephen, given the number of times you contradict yourself, that is an impossible guarantee to me.
Well,
lovely.
But I'll just put in my 2 cents. I don't, I think Carlo and I have a good way of working together to make this happen and make it look just like a normal tabular object. But
okay, fine.
That's what I'm looking for. And
that's what I'm looking for.
So two things just to manage your expectations. We will need to go back on the design because there's a couple of things that we haven't fully gelled, like whether turning an external tabular into tabular that sits in memory is to tabular from tabular, yet another function. That's the main thing. Second thing, you will have to review the boxes because it will not look like a table. It will look like a summary box before evaluate.
That's fine. I'm happy
so
with that.
To review those two things.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that. You're making a symbolic thing. It is a handle. There are functions that actually make it, bring it into memory.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there are a couple of things to review, but you've looked at it and you mostly.
we need a name for this operation of going from the remote tabular to the, suck it all into memory.
Yeah.
It's kind of like tabular cache, like local cache, but it's not
Didn't
quite
we spend
that.
a bunch of time naming that like a few weeks ago?
What did we come up with?
I don't remember.
I also don't. I think we didn't completely
there wasn't
converge.
one thing that we said, oh my God, this is perfect. But there were a number of things like tabular fetch.
Right. Yeah, right.
Because caching is not the right thing.
No, it's not the right thing.
Yeah.
It could be import tabular. I think that's what we discussed last time.
Yeah, it could be.
I think import tabular is a decent idea. I think that will allow us to have kind of various kinds of options as we do with toTabular and so on. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a little problematic, but we can, I don't think we have to dig into this today.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we need to dig in, but I already have like import of data connection object, and that returns a tabular if it points to something that, represents it. Yeah.
So that's just a repackaging of that capability then. But you've already got a tabular summary box as opposed to a data connection object. What we're saying is the data connection object has been moved into a tabular summary box, and now we have to take that tabular summary box and hydrate it basically locally. Does that make sense?
No.
Yeah, to an extent, like I think
let's go through that again.
Data connection object and tabular will be in some sense interchangeable in some situations.
I understand that, but I think the data connection object, okay, so data connection object, you kind of expect, you could say tabular of the data connection object, and you will get what I would assume will be one of these summary box like, remote tabulars.
Yes, but
well, if it points to a file that you can bring into memory, it's just going to bring it into memory.
I understand.
Yeah,
I understand, but most of the time it won't do that. Most of the time it's going to be too big to bring into memory when it's going to be simply, pointing to that. So you have an operation, Sean, that is going to just bring it into memory, right? Which is an import operation, and that's great, and that's exactly what we need. The only question is how to package that when the thing that is staring, that's in front of your nose is the summary box thing.
I don't know. You keep talking about the summary box. I mean, it seems like the real question is just we have two. Given that you have, say, an .sqlite file on your computer, we have two ways of accessing it with tabular. Is my understanding. One is you just import it all into memory, and it's in memory, and you've got a tabular, whatever. And the other is that you have a tabular that's backed by SQLite in some way. And so if you have a data connection object that refers to this thing, then when you import it, you could get either one of those two things.
Well, right now, a data connection object is just a way to specify the location to something. And right now, everything is designed for in-core. As far as out-of-core goes, there wasn't really any design for that yet.
All right, fine. All right, so, let's move on. Roger, you're in charge. What are we looking at next?
Okay, so next, after that, is data cleaning. And that's to essentially get both the right structure and the right semantics so that you can do further processing, ask questions, get answers.
By the way, for goodness sake, don't change the format of this basic operations on columns. We don't have lines like that in guide pages, right? The subline underneath basic data cleaning.
Okay, we can remove that.
That's not a format that we have.
Yes, it is.
Really? Where?
Well, we introduced it, just a few years ago.
I've not seen it. I've never done that. Where do we have that?
Well, you can do a search in the guide page system and we'll find where we have it. I don't know exactly.
I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan. I think it's an excuse for not saying what you mean more clearly. I mean,
well, we can remove it. That's not a problem. I mean, it'll be a little bit more mysterious, but we can remove it.
Well, that's why it shouldn't be. Basic data cleaning. If it's basic operations on columns, why doesn't it say that? You've got a page about data cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what that section is, then call it that.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I don't know what restructuring data cleaning is. I mean, are you restructuring the operation of data cleaning?
No, we restructure the data structure.
Okay, fine.
So what's values in some cases will be names of columns in another case. That's what pivoting does, okay. And vice versa.
Well, so then, operations on columns, restructuring, data restructuring will be the next one. These subheadings are not helping you. They're just being an excuse to have a lousy overall heading. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and again, that value cleaning makes further analysis possible, more robust. That you don't need to say that there. That's what we have our blurb at the top to say. Okay. In any case,
and like another like here, column types is all the others are functional. Column types is an option.
Yeah, I don't think we have quite the right solution to change types. I think it's complicated to do right now, but I think it's an important data cleaning operation.
I also think that like somebody who comes from the Wolfram language and tries to understand what pivot does without ever finding the word transpose there will be utterly confused.
Oh yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about these. We have not reviewed these pivot things yet.
We've looked at them, but we should go back. Absolutely.
I've never heard of pivot longer.
Well, yeah, we're closer to being able to review that, Stephen. Maybe next week.
Okay, fine. Okay.
Yeah, so here's an example of something that I do think is important. Like if something comes in as strings and it's dates, or something comes in as strings and should be categories. Those things
I agree.
Big impact.
So those are like semantic import, but your point is they're already in there. How do you how do you change them?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm not sure why that isn't, transform columns, right?
Well, I think you're onto something in that. For example, transforming string to dates is a very explicit operation where you might want to say what the date format is. So yes, that's something that in other situations we would do with, say, interpreter or data object or whatnot. Whereas transforming strings into categories doesn't change the data at all.
Yeah, it does.
How? Oh, it doesn't. It changes the representation of the data only.
Yeah.
Well, I'm totally confused here. Transform columns is not about separating and combining columns. It's about applying functions.
Oh, no, on the data cleaning page, that's what it is about. That's the only, because we had separate functions for this, but now they're based in transform columns. So that's it.
Yeah, okay, I understand. But I think it needs to clarify, because this operation that we're just talking about now could trivially be a transform columns operation.
Then we'll list transform columns here and what the new task that it does.
I think so, yeah, because I mean, transform columns, I would have thought, what you'd want to do is list whatever function you actually use to, transform all those strings into dates. What is that function? Is it import string? Is it date object? What is it? See what I'm saying? I mean, in other words, what I would imagine it would look
From
like
date
is transform column. Okay. All right. So transform columns of, whatever it is, my date arrow, from date string of hash my date. Is that right? I mean, is that correct thing? Yeah. Okay. And are we happy with that way of changing data types, basically? Or is it better to have something which is in bulk able to do it for a whole column? Maybe that's able to do it for a whole column. I don't know.
Well,
That's largely an implementation detail you shouldn't be concerned
Yes.
about. Like,
Okay, but are we happy with that approach, or do we want to have something instead where
it doesn't always work. Like there are some situations where like, for example, you're turning strings into integers. You can use from digits or whatever. That is fine. But if you want to transform integer 32 to integer 64, maybe we should use cast, but you really didn't like that the other time we talked about this.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think what we should do, perhaps we should have a thing that is some kind of setting in transform columns that allows you to just say, I mean, do we have already a syntax?
Why isn't it, right, rule goes to type of, value, comma, new type?
Possibly it should be, but an alternative would be something even simpler than that. Transform columns, quotes my date, arrow, and then an interpreter type as a string. Or is there another meaning for a string-to-string transformation there? In transform columns, what does column name arrow string mean?
So far, nothing, but it's kind of like interpreter types are not at all well suited for this because they always expect strings on one end, and on the other end, on the output end, they don't necessarily return integer 64 or 32. You can always produce integer.
I understand, but it's something like interpreter types.
It,
Or is it like import types? You tell me. What's it like? What existing system do we have?
It's okay. So first of all, you need two types, right? You need an ingo, and sometimes there's more because sometimes like going from string to date is not as simple as that because you need a date format sometimes, right? Or from string to real, you might have commas for decimal.
Listen, if it's that complicated, it's just going to be a function. It's just going to be you apply whatever transformation function you want.
I think that's fine, but there are some situations because Tabular is more strongly typed than the normal evaluator where we don't have a function, and the only equivalent we have is in the compiler, and that's cast.
Well,
like
we could. I mean, sort of bizarre way to use these types is the numeric tabular types are very much associated with numeric array. So we could use numeric array of blah, comma type for those types. It's kind of a hack around avoiding using cast.
Not a fan. I mean, look, I think for the operation of going from an integer 32 to an integer 64, I think that's a low-level operation, and cast doesn't sound too scary for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's typically what they're going to be.
But let's not try and use cast to go from a string, to a data object.
No, I agree with you there.
I kind of agree with that. Yeah.
Right, but what you're telling me is it's all so complicated it just should be a function. You see what I'm saying?
I don't think it's complicated. I think it just feels much more natural to use n to go from integers to reals than anything else.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. We're not disagreeing about the outcome. So there's no need to have some specialized, column column casting outer function, right? It's just transform columns, and there's no particular shortcut syntax. It's just transform columns, hash, column name blah, arrow n of hash column name. Is that correct?
Right. Correct.
Okay. Because another point is that we think it will be as common to want to combine three neighboring columns and so on as to do an in-place transformation of one particular column. Is that correct?
Yeah. Why do you think that?
Well, because I think dates might be sprayed across three columns, things like this.
Well, that's combining columns.
Yeah, but
I understand that. But I understand. I know. I got it. But the whole point is there's no reason we don't have to talk about anything specific to, this type conversion section here, which probably should just talk about transform columns again. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't agree. If that first section is basic operations on columns, I think you should say transform, separate, or combine columns as the description of transform columns. Right? Because I think it's and I think you should rename that section basic operations on columns. And get rid of it's very interesting how putting in a subtitle makes the main title worse. It really is very interesting.
There is one thing that is also interesting to me, and is that, like, for example, in the type stuff and the value data cleaning, obviously you would use transform columns, but then you would use, I don't know, transform columns and n. So it's like it's somehow the guide type of
the guide page should list some of those functions, right?
Yeah,
some
but
of the common functions.
It's like you always want to use those two in combination. Like n on its own will not help
Let me make
you.
a suggestion about the guide pages, okay? Once you get to, I don't know what type inference is saying here, but that should be a sub-guide page which lists functions which are mostly not tabular functions, but are just the functions you're likely to want to use if you're doing those kinds of type conversions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then there's transform missing, which we haven't quite finished, and this one, outliers, which we haven't really started on, which we might not ship.
Right. I mean, transform outliers. I mean, wait a minute. If I have minus 99 means missing.
Well, then it's part of missing.
Okay. So for outliers, that's mostly a bird sat on the anemometer, so it said the wind was 0. Is that right? Or is that supposed to turn into missing? Should turn into missing because we don't know what the wind was because the bird was sitting on the anemometer. Right. So explain to me the use case for outliers, for the transform outliers.
So the use case for outliers is that when you have extreme value data, which it often is something that probably went wrong or in the measurement process or something like that. And what it does is has an inordinate impact on some types of summaries, like mean. If you have, all your values is between
what do you want to transform it into? Do you want to transform it into a missing, or do you want to stick it back in some value?
Yeah, so missing is one way to do it, and one is to project it into sort of some number of sigmas out. So those are examples.
I have a question. Okay.
So we have something called Windsorized mean, which does that.
Right. I remember that. Yeah. Okay, but so hold on.
And,
so what you're basically saying...
trimmed mean is making it missing. I mean, it's removing it.
Right. Okay, so the basic point here is for transform missing, it's basically the data point's going to get thrown away. Transform outliers, the data point's going to get thrown away, and then the operation that's operating on it is going to just say that was a missing data point, but it knows nothing about the data point other than that it was missing.
Right,
correct?
But transform missing also has a bunch of imputation stuff. You can fill in.
No, I understand that, but
right.
about the
transform missing
itself.
If I say, I mean, I think like transform missing, I think is different from what you're saying, because if I say mean of a tabular column and the tabular column has some missing stuff in it, right? I think that's, if I want to get the mean of that column and ignore all the missing stuff, I don't think transform missing does that, right? Transform missing is if I want to get rid of the missings in some way, right?
Well, to replace the missing with something that's not missing.
Well, yeah,
right. Make it so there's no missings.
Yes.
Right.
But I feel like transform outliers really wants to be two-function, because one of them transforms the outliers into missings, and the other does an imputation in a way that would be impossible if it went through missings and forgot what it was.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
One is like outlier to missing, and the other is outlier to normal values.
Yes, I agree.
Actually, one other question is, well, first of all, is there a difference between an outlier and an anomaly?
No. Well, I mean, maybe it should be anomaly because
Yeah.
outlier for categorical stuff is probably, it's not.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay, fine. But then so okay, so if it's anomaly, then we have a couple of anomaly functions, right? For like replacing anomalies and stuff like that. Are any of those relevant?
We have anomaly detect. What else do we have? And we have synthesize missing data.
Yeah.
What else do we have?
I thought there was one other, but
Let's look.
I mean, we have a bunch of built-in robust descriptive statistics that part of their operation is to do an outlier transformation. That's why they're called robust.
yeah, it looks like there's anomaly detect, there's delete anomalies, find anomalies.
Yeah, I see that there down at the bottom under feature data cleaner on this very page.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I just wonder if those should just, I mean, do we need new functions, or is it just that those functions take a tabular or something, or tabular column or something like that?
I think Giulio has said he doesn't really like the design of those functions as they are, and so he wanted to make new functions, but without him, I can't really speak for him.
Okay.
Well,
let's hear about that.
the other problem is that in general, like the problem is that you always kind of want to go through transform columns. You don't want to, like, all of those functions on anomalies are things that take one column and return one column.
Mhm.
So they might
one of the things that these functions can do is to basically give you a menu of obvious things to do. So you don't have to program it up yourself every time. It's a Turing complete system. We can program anything, but how easy to use should it be?
I'm sorry. So what's your point there?
I mean, my point is that we can program anything.
Sure.
Right.
And, so that's the point.
Your average
so what are
user
the common
can't program.
cases? Right.
Exactly.
So what are the common cases?
Yeah. So that's what should be in these things. Now, I don't know.
I agree. Named common cases.
Exactly. No, this one is not. This needs a revisit, but.
Okay. Can we go on? I'm still I still don't really get the flow of this meeting. So, I mean, what we're identifying here is we need to have a discussion about transform outliers.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to have a discussion about pivot functions.
Yeah. So this is to identify, otherwise we just keep talking about the same things,
right.
we forget
so
the other ones.
I think we've identified that. We've identified some problems with the format of the guide page. I've suggested some sub-guide pages. Do you agree with that concept?
Well, I'm going to try to make do without it because it already has 7 sub-guide pages.
No. I'm making a specific suggestion. Go to that page that you were on. I was making a specific suggestion. Mm-hmm. When you go to something like, type conversion, right?
Yeah.
I strongly think they're going to be 30 different functions that are relevant to that. And to show people, here are the functions that might be relevant is super useful.
Yes.
For dates, for entities, for whatever else. You're not going to include them on this page. They would gum up this page.
Well, I think we start on this page. And if it turns out to be that many, yes, then we build a sub-guide page.
Okay, I think it will need a sub-guide page, but okay, go on. I think it's convenient. It's nice to have a sub-guide page. It helps people.
Yes, but we already have 7.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, guide pages are cheap.
Okay. This is the transformation. So these are so the goal of this page is they're transformations where you ask questions and try to get answers. So these are, if the other one, like how to get data, how to clean data, and the basic object, this is I think the highest level operations of transformations.
I mean, like, what the hell does union do on tabular objects?
It does join and then delete duplicates pretty much and sort.
Delete duplicates of what kind? Delete duplicates of rows or what?
Rows. Yeah.
Okay. So presumably there is a join. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Where is it on this? I mean, in combining tabular objects, I would have expected join would be right there.
Column-wise combine include joins.
I think it only includes join acrosses, not vertical joins.
Right.
But join is a no-brainer and it already works. It doesn't need further documentation or anything. Like what Rob has already implemented it.
Well, I understand, but on this page where you're talking about union and complement and so on, it
It's
seems
right
like
there.
you should be mentioning. Oh, it's right there. Sorry,
It should not be in this order, I think. But yeah.
No,
Yes.
I agree. I
That's
just didn't know
right.
what worked and what not this morning. So or
Yeah.
last week.
Okay. I think we need to actually be trying to, wait a minute, number categorize. I don't know what any of those are. Those are new functions I've never seen before.
Well, you have seen them because we've talked about them, but we haven't discussed them at length. So those are for many cases when a workflow is to segment your data effectively. There could be sort of number ranges, like if it's age, maybe you have young, middle, and old, or something like that. And that's often a way to set up your data, augment it in some way that you can see whether those.
Actually, I want to come back to a comment Carlo made when we were talking about data types, because he was saying something about strings and putting them in categorical buckets, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. I mean, what would not be good is to have some invisible categorical buckets. How do you tell? Okay, so let's say young, middle, old, whatever. What do you actually do? So you've got, a bunch of 44, 45 years old, whatever they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then sorry, and then your is it that you would make another column in your tabular, or you would transform that column?
Yes,
well,
you'd
either
make
way.
another column.
Yeah, that's the typical case. You have another
column.
column.
Making a new column or transforming the old one, it's just about whether the new one has the same name as the old.
Sure, I understand.
But you're changing the data from the actual numbers to categories.
Right. But my question is this.
So that is also a way to create subsets of data. Okay. When you categorize something, that's a way to create subsets.
Well, I know, but then we've got all these grouping things that group based on the value of some column. And I guess what I'm asking is, if you've got a big list of strings, small, medium, large, let's say, and something knows that column is only small, medium, large. It's something internal to the tabular data structure that knows, by the way, this column is only going to have 3 possible strings in it, correct?
Yes. And sometimes it can also know that they're ordered. Like if they come from numbers and you do intervals, they're going to be ordered.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So, okay. But my question is, when you do normal of that tabular, any of that information is gone, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So we don't have yet a sort of a way for these categorical stuff to live in the system like dates can. I think we should eventually.
Right. So one of the points there, so what this would look like, I mean, we do have categorical data in various kinds of visualization, do we not?
Yeah.
And we have there, how do you specify small, medium, large being ordered for visualization purposes?
Categorical scale.
Ordinal scale.
Ordinal scale. Okay, we have 2, nominal and ordinal scale. So ordinal is ordered.
Okay.
You give the list, and that order in which you give them is the order.
And that's the order they will be rendered in the visualization.
Yes.
But so, I mean, imagine that we had a wrapper that was called, I don't know, categorical object.
Yes.
Okay. And that it knew about small, medium, large being an ordinal scale thingy.
Yes. I think it would be kind of like a data object, right? So the data object contains a bunch of extra information about which calendar you use, and
Yeah.
you know,
But data objects do satisfy greater than signs and so on. I mean, you can do greater than, you can do you can do equality testing.
And now we can even do descriptive statistics on them.
Right.
Right.
So
if we had that object, they would sort right, they would do other things. You know, we'll gradually sort of build out what they do.
I understand, but I mean, in the case of a from tabular or a normal of a tabular, let's assume that this column has been made. I mean, in the little iconography at the top of the column, we presumably will indicate whether it is a grouped categorical or a whatever they're calling bucketed, collection of things, or just free-form strings.
Yeah, there's the string icon and the category icon are different.
Okay, but it's a little bit disappointing then. Okay, so let's imagine that I want to create a tabular just in pure Wolfram language code. And how do I go? So let's say I've got a small, medium, large column, okay? And I'm going to do from to tabular. How do I tell it that I want that column to be small, medium, large, ordinal, categorical objects?
So right now, I think the Rob has that you can say ordinal scale and nominal scale.
Yeah. No.
Okay. So what does that look like?
You do it with this. You use column types goes to categorical ordered of small, medium, large.
Oh, we changed the names.
Yeah.
But initially it was the same name we used in visualization. It was the
same names, but we changed the names. And then with that, it'll verify those categories and basically
right,
represents
so that's an approach where you're basically using a template for the whole column and saying categorical ordered, blah, blah, blah. An alternative would be that every single element has a symbolic wrapper saying what it is.
Right.
And so we need to understand the trade-offs of those things. Because clearly, if it's every single element, we can, use them elsewhere in the system and expect to round trip them back to tabular.
Right.
On the other hand, if it's purely an annotation in the tabular, once it comes out with normal, all that information is gone.
Right. But I think that it's a little bit more of a build out to do that system-wide kind of support. So
I understand, but we should know where we're going. So that
but I think we should go there. So I think that is the right direction to make them proper. Kind of like a data object is proper.
Okay. So then we'll have a change then between this version where we will end up with a metadata, categorical in metadata only, so to speak, versus a kind of locally categorical thing.
Right.
Right.
I think it's yes.
I think we should know what the rough design of the local categorical thing is, even though we're not going to do it immediately. Okay, because presumably the main difference would be in terms of the annotation. Well, if you extract that element, if you do an operation on that element using transform columns or something, you're going to need to know whether it's maybe you don't. Maybe it's reasonably transparent. Maybe most operations
you do need to know, Stephen. This is something I spent not huge amounts of time, but not small amount of time, is figuring out which operations in transform columns can just operate on the categories and which actually have to work with the data itself.
I understand that. I understand you need to know implementationally. I'm saying from a user's point of view, if I want to just say, if X is greater than 7, do this or something.
Yep.
And I mean, X is greater than 7 is never going to work with small, medium, large usually. But in the future, if X is greater than medium, will work. But okay, here's the point. Anything that doesn't work now that starts working when we change this is all good.
Yeah, I think that there's a variety of things that injection into the system can do. One of the things we could do is to curate a bunch of categorical scales, like bond scales and other things.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that would be nice. I think it'll be
We
useful.
also need this categorical local to be able to do sort correctly, because order would know about them then.
But this is another thing we need to have for another meeting. I unfortunately have to leave. But you guys can continue, but I'm sorry, I've got to go. See you guys later.
Bye.
Fine.